I never expected an alien child to declare that her mother liked me. One moment I was just trying to navigate a crowded space bazaar without spilling my coffee, and the next, my life was completely, irreversibly, hilariously, and terrifyingly changed. Kieran stumbled over the edge of a hovering crate, his coffee sloshing dangerously, as if the universe had personally decided today was the day he would meet an alien child who could ruin his life in 3 words. The bazaar of Orbis Prime stretched endlessly around him, a kaleidoscope of lights and languages that collided like a symphony performed by drunk musicians. Floating carts zipped past, piloted by creatures whose limbs made human anatomy look like a child's doodle, and holographic signs buzzed overhead, advertising everything from anti-gravity boots to edible stars that reportedly tasted like nostalgia. Kieran muttered a curse under his breath, careful not to spill the remainder of his coffee onto the neon fruit stacked precariously on the next crate. Then she appeared, Leary. Small, impish, with skin the color of liquid sapphire and hair the shade of molten fire, which waved in gentle defiance to gravity. Her ears, long and tapering like twin sails, twitched with a precision that made them seem alive. She was crouched behind a crate, eyes bright and unblinking, clearly sizing him up the way a cat might inspect a particularly promising bug. Hi," Kieran said, his voice teetering between greeting and apology. He realized immediately that aliens, at least this one, didn't understand half measures. Either you were polite or you were a hazard to their immediate health. Leary tilted her head and giggled, a sound like wind chimes caught in a mischievous breeze. "You drop things," she stated flatly. Kieran's eyes followed his errant coffee. "Yes," he admitted with all the dignity he could muster. "That's part of my charm." He attempted a bow but nearly toppled the crate. Leary's laughter rang out again, completely undeterred by his clumsiness, and he wondered if all alien children were born with a cruel sense of humor, or if this was just bad luck. Before he could ask a single coherent question, Leary pointed a small finger at him with decisive authority. "My mom likes you." Kieran froze mid-step. The coffee cup wobbled dangerously, and his mind went blank. His brain fired off a dozen illogical scenarios at once. Did she mean likes in a friendly way? Was this some alien ritual meant to trap him into a lifetime of interstellar servitude? Or had he just been officially declared a target for something far worse than social awkwardness? He stammered. He tried to find an adult voice inside his mouth, but all he got was a squeak that sounded suspiciously like the beginning of a human scream. Leary, unbothered by this display of frailty, hopped onto a crate beside him, kicking her legs lightly, which somehow made her float an inch above the surface. "She thinks you're funny, and tall, and your hair is okay." Kieran blinked. Did she just critique his hair? Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? In this world of sentient furniture, floating groceries, and neon advertisements for things he couldn't even pronounce, a blue-skinned child judging his haircut was entirely reasonable. He rubbed the back of his neck and tried not to look embarrassed, which only made him look like a malfunctioning robot. Leary's laughter bubbled again, and Kieran realized that maybe she was the only creature in the entire bazaar that wasn't actively trying to sell him something or con him out of his meager human credits. "You want to meet her?" she asked suddenly, tilting her head with a conspiratorial air that suggested the answer was already obvious. Kieran swallowed hard. "Meet who?" "My mom. She wants to see you. She says she likes you." He felt as though someone had pressed the eject button on his life. Meeting an alien mother after a child's unsolicited endorsement was not in any human survival handbook he'd ever read. And yet, curiosity gnawed at him, a mischievous worm in the stomach that refused to be ignored. Sure," he offered weakly, which was probably the most confident he could manage without collapsing entirely. Leary clapped her hands, and the sound made nearby vendors look up. Somehow, Kieran was now an unwilling celebrity of a bizarre, interstellar comedy. Leary led him through the winding streets and gravity-defying corridors of the bazaar, occasionally pointing out creatures that were, by all human definitions, absurd. There was a gelatinous salesman who attempted to fold itself into a perfect cube, a tiny winged drone hawking fruit that apparently tasted like memories, and a group of tentacled musicians whose rhythm could make your shoes vibrate with existential dread. Kieran tripped over nothing several times, and each stumble drew an amused chirp or giggle from Leary. Finally, they reached the crystalline tower of her home, a structure that looked like someone had spilled liquid glass into a perfect spiral and then left it to float. Inside, surfaces shifted gently, adjusting to accommodate gravity, or whatever approximation of it this place had. Light bent in impossible ways, reflecting off walls like liquid prisms. Hovering tools buzzed around as if they had minor opinions on interior decoration, and furniture rearranged itself as they passed. Kieran stepped carefully, muttering about potential lawsuits if he fell on sentient chairs. Leary tugged at his sleeve impatiently. "You'll be fine. She's nice. She just watches." He hesitated. The warning tone was undeniable. Leary's "just watches" sounded to him like something a human mother would say before releasing a toddler with a slingshot. When they finally reached the grand chamber, Kieran caught his first glimpse of the woman himself. Serenia. Blue skin that gleamed like polished sapphire, hair that cascaded red and wild, long ears quivering in subtle amusement, and eyes sharp, intelligent, and entirely unafraid of human awkwardness. She regarded him silently, a slight, knowing smile curling her lips. Kieran's knees threatened mutiny. He could feel a bead of sweat tracing the line of his jaw as he realized this was real, and somehow, Leary had dragged him into the den of an interstellar goddess of warmth and authority all at once. Before he could formulate a word, Leary chirped, "See, she likes you, don't be scared." And in that instant, Kieran realized that, somehow, the ridiculous, chaotic, utterly absurd adventure of being liked by an alien mother had just begun, and that perhaps falling over a crate in a crowded bazaar was the best mistake he'd ever made. Kieran followed Leary through the crystalline corridors of the tower, each step a careful negotiation with gravity that seemed to bend and twist at will. The floor beneath him shifted subtly, tilting like a ship in calm waters, and he stumbled once more, narrowly catching himself on a hovering console that hummed with faint blue light. Leary, utterly unconcerned by his human clumsiness, floated a few inches above the ground, giggling and pointing at him with one tiny hand. "You humans are so unstable," she announced, as though he were a particularly amusing experiment. "Do you always wobble this much?" "Only on days ending in Y," Kieran muttered, brushing off imaginary dust and praying he didn't leave skid marks across the sentient floor. The console beeped at him, which he interpreted as either a warning or applause. Leary clapped. "You're funny," she said. "My mom likes funny." The child led him into a chamber that defied expectation. Light poured from nowhere, scattering in prismatic colors over walls that weren't quite walls, smooth surfaces that rippled and shimmered, changing shape with the tiniest motion of air. Hovering objects moved of their own accord. Books rearranged themselves mid-flight, tools buzzed like irritable insects, and a small floating robot trailed behind them, chirping what Kieran assumed was commentary. He squinted at it. "Does that thing talk?" "Sort of," Leary replied. "It tells jokes sometimes, but only the bad ones like yours." Kieran blinked. "I'll take that as a compliment." He immediately tripped over a softly glowing vine that had grown horizontally across the floor. Leary's laughter echoed like bells. "It's a home hazard," she said seriously, "but my mom likes that kind of danger. It keeps things exciting." They turned a corner, and Kieran's jaw dropped. Serenia stood there, arms crossed elegantly, observing him with the serene authority of someone used to command and amusement in equal measure. She was breathtaking, skin a flawless, luminous blue, hair a fiery cascade that defied gravity only slightly, and long, graceful ears that quivered with what Kieran decided must be delight or mild judgment. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, tracked his every falter, yet there was warmth there too, an undercurrent that made him both nervous and inexplicably comfortable. "Hello, Kieran," she said, voice smooth and melodious, carrying a hint of teasing. "I hear you're amusing." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Hello." Somehow this felt entirely insufficient. He could almost hear the chorus of all human greetings failing him. Your daughter says you like me." Serenia's smile widened subtly. She has a talent for honesty, she said, and for accurate exaggeration, but yes, I find you interesting. Kieran's thoughts exploded. Interesting, that was promising, dangerous. Something that would probably end with him being an unwilling participant in an interstellar tea ceremony. He cleared his throat, feeling like a novice acrobat on a shifting tightrope. Well, I try to be funny. That's my thing. Serenia raised an eyebrow just slightly, and the tiny motion sent a shiver of power and amusement down Kieran's spine. Humor is universal, she said. Though some species fail at it spectacularly, you are passable. Leary floated between them, waving her arms like a conductor orchestrating chaos. See, passable, that's good, right? Kieran exhaled shakily. I'll take passable, it's better than disastrous. He glanced around, taking in the room. Crystalline shelves stretched impossibly high, filled with floating artifacts that hummed or pulsed gently. A plant with translucent leaves waved at him, and a small gravity orb hovered near his head, spinning lazily and bumping into him occasionally. He ducked. Leary giggled again. Don't worry, she said. It won't hurt you much. Serenia's lips twitched in amusement. Your species has a unique relationship with caution, she observed. Do you always treat life as if it's a series of potential catastrophes? Kieran flopped into a chair that promptly adjusted to support him, lifting him slightly off the ground in a gentle, rocking motion. Apparently, he admitted. I trip over air. It's kind of a talent. Leary clapped her hands. See, you're perfect for Mom. She likes weird humans. Kieran shot her a helpless glance. Weird humans are not usually considered ideal. Not here, Serenia said smoothly. Here they are amusing and therefore valued. She gestured elegantly toward a table that floated and rearranged itself as they approached. Sit, eat, relax. Or, at least, attempt relaxation without falling over. Kieran cautiously lowered himself, still wary of the chair's subtle movements. A small dish floated before him, spilling miniature, glowing fruits into a pile that hovered midair. He poked at them with his finger, half expecting a trap, but Leary rolled her eyes. They taste like fun memories, she said. Try one. He bit, and colors burst in his mouth like fireworks. Not dangerous, not poisonous, just astonishing. He laughed, unable to help himself. I could get used to this, he admitted, though he knew that saying so would probably mark him for more bizarre lessons. Serenia watched him, expression calm but intent. Your laughter is unusual, honest, rarely forced. Kieran coughed on a burst of glittering juice. Thanks. He tried not to look like he had just passed some alien test of character. Leary, of course, floated a bit higher, proud and triumphant. See, Mom likes you, and you're funny, and you eat our food without exploding. He laughed again, realizing the absurdity of it all. Floating fruits, sentient furniture, a child who could read him like an open book, and a mother who balanced power and humor like a practiced tightrope walker. Somehow, amidst the chaos, he felt a flicker of belonging. And as he looked up at Serenia, who tilted her head with the faintest smirk, he knew he was stepping into a world that would challenge everything he thought he knew about people, aliens, and himself. One comic, awkward, utterly magical moment at a time. Kieran awoke to the soft hum of the tower, the crystalline walls shimmering in the iridescent light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. A small orb floated lazily above him, projecting holographic patterns that danced across the ceiling like a slowly shifting aurora. He rubbed his eyes and realized with no small amount of awe that he hadn't once thought about falling over or spilling coffee since yesterday. Somehow, in a world of floating furniture, sentient plants, and tiny aliens who critiqued his every move, he felt settled. Almost normal. Leary hovered nearby, brushing a strand of her red hair behind one long ear, her small wings buzzing softly. Morning, she chirped. Breakfast is floating. Try not to eat it too fast or the food will get dizzy. Kieran laughed, a sound that surprised him with its ease. I'll try, he said, marveling that he actually looked forward to her brand of nonsense. The floating fruit hovered in a neat pile above the table, glowing faintly, and he reached out, letting the pieces drift into his hands like a gravity-defying juggling act. Leary clapped and nodded approvingly. Serenia appeared behind her daughter, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had long ago learned how to command a household that defied physics. Her long ears twitched slightly as she observed Kieran. "You've adjusted," she remarked lightly. "Not perfectly, but better than expected." Kieran grinned, feeling a spark of pride. "Better than expected is practically my life motto," he said, and the smirk that tugged at her lips made him realize he was no longer the bumbling human who tripped over air in a crowded bazaar. He had adapted, not fully perhaps, but enough to survive and even enjoy the chaos. Leary floated over and tugged at his sleeve. "Mom said we can show you something today," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Something really fun." Curiosity sparked. Kieran followed them deeper into the tower. The corridors twisted in ways that made human logic groan under the strain, and gravity subtly shifted beneath his feet, nudging him into the rhythm of the place. Floating devices hovered alongside them, emitting faint chimes, and tiny holographic fish swam through the air as if it were water. Kieran tried not to stare too much, reminding himself he was here to see, not gawk, though the urge was strong. They reached a large chamber at the top of the tower, a space open to the swirling cosmos outside. Stars stretched across the void in brilliant arcs, and planets glimmered with subtle iridescence. In the center, a platform extended outward, hovering over nothing but deep space. Serenia gestured toward it. "This is a place where we celebrate," she said, her voice calm but tinged with anticipation. "Where we honor honesty, courage, and connection." Kieran's stomach fluttered. Leary bounced in front of him, eyes wide. "Mom says you're honest," she said, "and funny and brave, well, sort of brave." He swallowed and smiled nervously. "Sort of brave is still a start," he said, the humor softening the tension. He looked at Serenia and noticed the subtle warmth in her gaze. She wasn't just observing him now, she was welcoming him, a recognition of who he had become over the brief, absurd, magical span of their acquaintance. "Step forward," she invited. "Don't worry, nothing will bite, or at least not in a permanent way." Kieran laughed nervously and stepped onto the platform. Instantly, gravity shifted, gently lifting him so that he floated alongside the adults and Leary. The stars stretched endlessly around them, and the sensation of being suspended in the void was exhilarating rather than frightening. Serenia's voice filled the space, calm and melodious. "You have learned to navigate uncertainty, Kieran. To stumble, to fail, and to laugh at yourself. That is courage, that is honesty, that is worth celebrating." Leary cheered, floating loops around him, and even the tiny holographic fish seemed to swirl in excitement. Kieran felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he hadn't known he was searching for. Here, with this family, odd, chaotic, luminous, he had found something unexpected. Acceptance, connection, and the freedom to be entirely himself. He looked at Serenia and smiled. I think I understand," he said, words catching in his throat. "I've been scared of everything, tripping, messing up, being human, I guess. But being here with you both, it's different, and good." Serenia's eyes softened, the faintest curve of her smile brushing her features like sunlight. "Good," she echoed. "That is enough. That has always been enough." Leary floated down, resting her small hands on Kieran's shoulders. "Mom likes you," she whispered conspiratorially, "and I like you too." Kieran laughed, the sound mingling with the soft hum of the tower, the drifting orbs, and the music of the stars outside. He realized that what had begun as an awkward, terrifying encounter in a crowded alien bazaar had become something extraordinary. A bridge across worlds, a bond forged by honesty, laughter, and the smallest of declarations. The three of them floated there for a moment, suspended in the gentle dance of light and gravity, and Kieran felt a profound sense of completion. He had arrived as a man who feared chaos and stumbled over his own existence, and he was leaving, or rather, staying, as someone who could embrace wonder, absurdity, and connection without fear. And as the distant planets twinkled in approval and Leary's laughter rang out like a chorus of tiny bells, Kieran knew that he was exactly where he belonged. In the orbit of a family that spanned not just species, but worlds, with humor, trust, and love tying them together in ways he could finally understand. He exhaled, a laugh escaping with it, light and full, and for the first time in his life, he didn't worry about falling. Because sometimes, floating was far better than standing.